6 months ago, my reproductive endocrinologist suggested that my husband and I consider IVF. And at the time, I was really, really torn about the decision. I had a lot of fears about cost and pain, quite frankly, and what the heck do we do with leftover embryos? And I just couldn't figure out what to do. I talked to my mom a lot. I talked to my friends a lot. I was in an online infertility support group. I asked those women, their opinions. And I was feeling pretty desperate, and I actually went to YouTube and typed in how to know when it's time to move to IVF. And I did not find a video that was particularly helpful. So now that I'm on the other side of having made the decision to move forward with IVF, I feel qualified to make the video that I wish I'd had 6 months ago. My name is Jess. I am a certified nurse midwife and nurse practitioner. I do some basic infertility workups at my current job, so I definitely understand the medical side of things. And my husband, Matt, and I have been trying to conceive pretty much continuously for the last 5 years. The only times we have not been actively trying to conceive is when I was pregnant. So we started our infertility journey almost right away when we started trying to conceive. I had known for years that I was probably going to need some help just because I had a super wonky menstrual cycle. When we had our initial workup, the OBGYN I was working with at the time said, well, I'll give you 3 rounds of Clomid, and then if you're not pregnant, I want you to see a reproductive endocrinologist. And fortunately, we got pregnant off of the first round of Clomid. Unfortunately, I miscarried that pregnancy. So then we tried several more rounds of Clomid, didn't get pregnant, and we'd been trying for about a year, and we went to a reproductive endocrinologist who suggested we do ovulation induction with IUI. And it took 3 rounds of letrozole, follicle stimulating hormone injections, and a trigger shot. But we did get pregnant on our 3rd round of IUI, from which we have our beautiful 2.5-year-old daughter, Ingrid. I am so grateful for her every day, but we would love to give her a sibling. And we thought, okay, well, we did this once. We know, the right formula, the right drugs to take, the right procedures to do. And we did 1 round of IUI. It did not work. We actually had to take a month off because we were traveling around my ovulation window for Christmas, and then somehow miraculously, spontaneously got pregnant. And I never in a million years thought that would ever happen. And then unfortunately, about 7 weeks, miscarried that pregnancy as well. So we decided to go back at it, try IUI again. And we were on our 5th round when reproductive endocrinology had said, like, hey, if this round doesn't work, I think you should consider IVF. And at the time, cost was definitely a big concern. Where we're at, the quote or estimate we got from our healthcare provider was that it would be between $27,000 and $32,000, which was definitely more than we were anticipating. And I work in healthcare, and I thought I was up to date on those numbers, and I definitely wasn't. Inflation has impacted them significantly. So that was a shock. And going from thinking like, okay, this might cost $15,000 to $20,000, how do we swing that, to like, oh no, this is going to be like $32,000. That doesn't seem doable. I didn't, I guess, know all of the ins and outs of IVF. The reproductive endocrinologist that we're seeing had us watch sort of a tutorial video. It was like an hour and a half long about the IVF process and what the procedures are like. And I just had this visceral reaction watching this like cartoon video of egg retrieval where they're putting a needle through a woman's vagina to get her eggs. And I thought, no, that's not for me. I can't do that. And I know some people will definitely feel shame around going to IVF. And I wouldn't say that I necessarily had feelings of shame, but I definitely had feelings of, what if this isn't really necessary? Like IUI worked last time, surely it's going to work again this time. And after like feeling really torn about it, the decision we came to is we would give it a few more rounds of IUI. And fortunately, our reproductive endocrinologist was very supportive, and he said, yeah, you're right, probably you will get pregnant eventually. Just, you hit a point of what is the most cost effective, and how long can you keep tolerating this. And then we did get pregnant that cycle, and we knew from the get-go that something was wrong. Typically on cycles that I've gotten pregnant, I've gotten a positive pregnancy test a few days before I was actually supposed to test. This time it was the very last day. I hadn't had any positives, and I had just the faintest pink line that you could ever possibly see. And it was faint enough that I called my nurse. I was like, I'm not even sure this is a real line. This could be an evaporation line. It could be a bum test. I don't necessarily trust it. And so she said, okay, let's just take another test tomorrow. Keep taking your progesterone. We'll see what happens. So we took the second test and the line got a little bit darker. And at this point, I'm thinking this is a chemical pregnancy. I'm probably going to miscarry in a couple of days. Something is not okay. And we tracked my HCG levels, and for weeks it would just straggle along. It would increase just tiny bit each time, but not double, except then one time it would double, and then the next time it would just be a small increase again. And we had multiple ultrasounds, couldn't see anything, until we got to the point where it's been 4 weeks since my positive pregnancy test. In theory, I should be like 7 to 8 weeks pregnant, and I go in for an ultrasound with my reproductive endocrinologist, and he says, I don't see anything in your fallopian tubes. I don't see anything in your uterus. My suspicion is it's an ectopic pregnancy. Whatever it is, it's not a healthy, viable pregnancy. And so he gave us the option of either doing methotrexate to end the development of the pregnancy, or doing a D&C to clear out the uterus, and then we would do a follow-up HCG the next day just to see is the HCG level dropping, and then we know the pregnancy was in my uterus. I really wanted to avoid methotrexate. I know it's a pretty rough drug to take, and the catch with methotrexate is then you cannot try to get pregnant for the following 3 months because it's a really toxic medication. So we opted for the D&C, and it went in for that procedure. It went so smoothly. I would do that again in a heartbeat. And the next day went back for a follow-up HCG level, and it was still rising. So then we knew for sure, okay, it's an ectopic pregnancy. We can't see where it's at. We assumed it was on the right side because I'd had 3 follicles on the right ovary that pregnancy, or that cycle. And so we had 2 rounds of methotrexate to terminate the pregnancy. I hit a point right after we took medication for the ectopic pregnancy of just absolute clarity of IVF is the next step for us. If I had this video back six months ago, when I was looking for it, what I would have needed to hear was, when it's time, you will know. And when you know, the things like the pain and the expense, the stress just become inconsequential. It just doesn't matter anymore because you know that this is the right step and you will figure it out. And it might be hard and stressful while you're figuring it out, but it will be worth it. So first, there's the shame around infertility. People will make a lot of judgments. I've heard a lot of comments about, oh, well, I would never do IVF. And yeah, 10 times out of 10, the people saying that have never had to consider that they might have to do IVF. I think most of us find out the hard way that insurance has deemed infertility as an unnecessary expense, and quite frankly, that's unacceptable. If you are struggling with infertility, you know how necessary and vital it is to your emotional and physical well-being to be able to build your family, which most people can do easily for free without even having to think about it, because their bodies work the way our bodies were designed to work. If you had a thyroid disorder, you would take medication to support that. If you had any other malfunction of any other body system, insurance would cover medication or surgery or whatever you need to fix that. And it's just totally unforgivable that people struggling with infertility don't have those costs covered by insurance and that it's deemed unnecessary. Don't ever let anyone make you feel guilty or ashamed of seeking health care for something that everyone else can have freely. The second big concern when considering IVF is the expense. Holy crap, is it expensive? There are states where it's cheaper, and to make it more affordable, we actually are pursuing IVF out of state. We did the math, and even with travel costs, for us, it's going to be cheaper to fly to Arizona and pursue IVF there rather than pay for IVF in the Pacific Northwest. And the third concern is that, it is going to hurt. But honestly, so does giving birth. And in being on the other side now, it is totally worth it. I think if I had found a video the first time we were considering IVF that just said, like, if you don't know for sure, then maybe it's not the right choice. When it is time, you will know, that would have been helpful. And I really believe in women's intuition. I really believe in trusting your gut. I think especially in healthcare and in labor and delivery, I've learned that time and time again. If I have a sense that something is not okay, or on the flip side that everything is okay, usually that's right. yeah, enough cannot be said about trusting your gut. And I highly, highly recommend. I'm actually in the middle of reading it right now. I'm not even done with it yet. There's my bookmark, but I'm reading this wonderful book that one of my patients recommended to me right now called Untamed by Glennon Doyle. And she talks a lot about the knowing, and just if you can just sit and be still for a moment and just think about whatever it is you're concerned about, that little nudge that you get internally that tells you what to do, you should follow that. And that is definitely how I feel about the decision to move forward with IVF. You know I can't guarantee that I won't have another miscarriage. I can't guarantee that I won't have another ectopic pregnancy, but it is definitely my best shot. The success rates are higher. If we do genetic testing on the embryos, then it's more likely that it'll be a successful pregnancy. And so if you're still warring with yourself about the decision of is this the right move for me or not, I think the main things to consider, obviously it's going to be painful. There's a lot of injections that come along with IVF. The egg retrieval, they'll give me anesthesia for it, but I'm sure it'll be painful afterwards. There's the risk of ovarian hyperstimulation syndrome and having pain from that. But having been through infertility once and coming through the other side with a baby in my arms, there's no amount of pain I wouldn't go through for her. When I think about the cost, it was really overwhelming when we first started to think about it, but I genuinely believe where there's a will, there's a way. If it's something that's important to you, you're going to figure it out. It can feel really overwhelming and lonely to seek infertility care and to start an IVF journey, and I'm happy to be your IVF buddy. I'm going to be really honest on this channel and post a lot of videos about what injections are like, what going in for procedures are like. And I'm happy to be open and honest about it because I don't think enough women are. And I think the more we talk about it, the less stigma there will be. The word midwife means with woman. And the reason I chose the name Every Mama's Midwife is that I think every mama deserves a midwife, and every woman deserves another woman to be with her and walk with her and guide her on these journeys. And I think even if you haven't met your babies yet or held them in your arms, you're still a mama on that journey. And that's why we go through this. That's why we go through the pain and the expense and the effort and all of it, is because we know it's worth it at the end. And there's nothing we wouldn't do for our children. If you found this helpful, hit the thumbs up, subscribe, and I'll see you on the next video.